Welcome back to the Muster Point podcast Beyond the Wire. I'm your host, Stu Mendelson, and today we sit down with Claire Lilly, founder of the Forcer Protocol, veteran advocate, and someone who's walked the long road alongside serving soldiers and their families. From the horses of the Household Cavalry to the heartbreak of loss, Claire shares her story with raw honesty, shining a light on PTSD, addiction, suicide, and how one family's tragedy sparked a national policing strategy now saving veterans' lives. This one's powerful, this one's personal, and it proves that change is possible, even in the darkest moments. So Claire, what a honour it is to have you on the Muster Point Beyond the Wire podcast. And thank you for taking your time out your day to talk to us.
Thank you.
So start at the beginning, your relationship with the armed forces. Where did it begin?
Where did it begin? At 18 years old, I was obsessed with horses. And a job became available for, one of the first females to join the Household Cavalry Mounted Regiment as a civil servant, so sort of within the equestrian sector. And I got the job. And so that's kind of where it all sort of started. I mean, kind of the terminology sort of civil servant, it kind of sounds like sort of, an office job or whatever, but I was very much kind of boots on the ground, so to speak, really kind of, side by side with, for 16 years.
And what did that involve? Were you actually posted to, or work from a regiment or a unit?
Yeah, so within Knightsbridge, so High Park Barracks. Yeah, so, it involves sort of, the guys were kind of armoured predominantly, and they didn't actually know a great deal about horses. Yeah. So kind of my role was to sort of, teach them and to kind of oversee the sort of the welfare and the psychological welfare of the horses and the herd, as we called it,
Yeah. So interestingly, I got injured in Afghanistan and had a very chaotic, traumatic sort of 13 years after I come out of the forces. And once I achieved recovery, I qualified as an equine therapist because part of my recovery had been involving horses and what incredible animals. I think there should be horses available to everyone, and not just for riding, but for interacting with. I think it's brilliant.
It's weird that you should say that. So my boss at the time, Major General Evelyn Webb Carter, he and a couple of others sort of nominated me to go over to California with Monty Roberts, who's the horse whisperer.
Yeah.
The horse whisperer is sort of based on him. It basically horse psychology, behaviour. People with horse problems, but actually it's horses with human problems, right? So, and kind of after I did my exams and graduated from there, kind of Iraq and Afghanistan sort of started to play out. And following on from that, he developed a program with veterans. And interestingly enough, now with Anglia Ruskin University and an organisation called Equine Warrior, they're now working together. I've sort of made some introductions there, and they're now working together on a piece of research within Knightsbridge with the horses with serving soldiers and equine therapy. So it's kind of all
brilliant. So
amazing.
The equine, it's a horse and pony sanctuary up in Liverpool called Shiloh, is where I was a client doing equine therapy, and then I studied. And I think Monty Roberts is actually a patron, or has been a patron, is very involved. So it's very based on his model. And as you said, that even as a client, and the whole ethos is, especially them being a sanctuary, like the horses are troubled, have their issues to deal with, and it sort of levels the playing field, because as a client, you don't feel, you're here to be fixed. It's you're both going to be fixed together.
Yeah, it's like an energetic exchange, really, because obviously they don't talk to you with their voice, right? But talk through body language and communicate. And they can tell like your stance, where your eyes are, your energetic field essentially as well is kind of what they read. Yeah,
it's incredible.
Your state, whether you're anxious or depressed or
I've witnessed some quite incredible sort of, you have to be there to believe it moments with horses where I'm like, what? Like, you say it to someone, they're like, nah, never. So no, trust me.
Yeah, they know.
So you mentioned, so you're being at Knightsbridge and the Household Cav, and obviously they have, as much as the public see them in a ceremonial role, they do have a warfighting role. So
George,
what was it you mentioned about Afghanistan and Iraq? So what?
Horrific. Again, a feeling sort of, Josh, our son, was a year old, and the Twin Towers had just been hit, and we lived in the tower in Knightsbridge, up on the 25th floor, and kind of I was sort of watching it sort of play out on the news. And my friend's son was an autistic brother, was autistic, and he was freaking out that particular tower might be hit as well, and that sort of stuff. And obviously you kind of watching with disbelief, and then I was then sort of back in work, and news that the boys, I say boys because it was male then, it's only sort of been in recent years that they've had a female sort of cohort come in, other than us sort of civvies. And just a sense of doom and dread, and that's kind of how it felt. Like, we didn't know, but we kind of knew that it wasn't going to be good, right?
So you mentioned, obviously, you had a son, but for those that aren't aware, you were married to Alan Forcer. So was he based at?
Yeah. So Alan. So I worked out of Household Division, so you got the Blues and Royals and the Lifeguards. Actually, I've worked in all of the squadrons, but I was predominantly in Household Division at that point, looking after the Major General and the Prince Charles's Equerry and various different people like that. And Alan kind of came along a year of me sort of being in that role, attached to the Coldstream Guard. So, because within Household Division, we'd have kind of, Scots Guards, Welsh Guards, just a couple from each to represent sort of each regiment, but on horseback. Alan took really, really well to horses. He was one of those kind of people, sort of, if you're kind of equestrian or an equestrian, you would know that, someone that sort of gets their rising trot straight away has got that kind of natural ability to sort of, and Alan quite quickly became a riding instructor, so a spearman within the Household Cavalry. And his life was, because he'd had a really troubled tour prior to, a couple of kinetic tours, if you like, in Kosovo and Ireland during the height of conflict. I mean, Kosovo is quite an underrated, sort of less spoken about.
I was just about to say that obviously through the media, and I think helped for heroes at that period, obviously Afghan and Iraq. Yeah. And then obviously Falklands was a big one, and obviously the two world wars. But I think that period of time in the 90s of like the Balkans and all that, people just don't appreciate what the guys and girls that deployed there witnessed. Yeah. Like I've heard some stories that would make your teeth curl.
Yeah, I mean, Alan and I kind of unpacked that quite a bit, because he was really struggling. And that was one of the reasons why he transferred over, because on R&R. So his mum actually took him to a civvy doctor, and he said he can't go back. He go back for the second part of the tour and sort of put on antidepressants and bits and pieces. And it was then after that his regiment sort of said, look, there's this job going in Knightsbridge working with horses, do you want to go and do it, basically? And he was like, yes. So that's kind of how Alan ended up in Knightsbridge. Yeah. I'd already been there a couple of years at that point. So it was always really clear, sort of night terrors, smells was a big thing for him. It's interesting actually, because when Alan passed away, I was sat out in the garden the next morning. There was this little blackbird hopping around, and the song Blackbird by the Beatles
Yeah.
sort of popped into my head. And kind of that's a song that I associate to Alan. Scroll forward a couple of years and I was sitting in a church. I'd just been on Poppies of Remembrance, and I was sitting in this little church, and this guy in front of me sort of turned around to me and said, "Are you here alone? Where's your husband?" And I was sort of like awkward. You know, didn't want to kind of trauma bomb him or anything. Anyway, it transpired he was a former Lord Mayor. And we had this incredible conversation about Kosovo. And he said, you must, if you ever kind of, you know, want to go over there, visit the Field of Blackbirds. And I learnt the other day that Kos means blackbird and Vo means field of, wow. So, yeah, the kind of the heritage, you know, and kind of, you know, the past of sort of that area, it was really full, you know, the Serbs and the Albanians. I mean, Alan sort of told me he was sitting up on a hill one day watching over a village, and there was like a drive-by shooting. Lots of people kind of got taken out. I mean, he was only kind of 18, 19 at this point, and he was attached to the Scots Guards. So he wasn't kind of with the people that he necessarily trained with, and they run down. There was no interpreter with them. And there was this guy on his knees, sort of riddled with bullets, you know, people screaming in a foreign language, and they weren't allowed to engage kinetically, you know, so, and I think that was a big thing, that he felt really, really helpless. He also said that, and this is horrific actually, that there was this elderly couple, because they were assigned to sort of look after the churches and things because they were being burnt down, and sort of break into properties and retrieve arms and things like that to disarm them. And that this couple would welcome them with open arms, and he'd gone off to sleep. Well, he says sleep, but he very rarely got sleep. You can't really sort of wind down from that, right? And he went back to his post, and the elderly couple had been found in the bath with their throats slit. And I mean, he just stuff like not just stuff like that, but stories like that were, that they were images and things that he can. And then you had kind of mass graves and decomposing bodies in sewers and all sorts of stuff. You know, it was brutal, like really, really brutal.
And just picking up on something you said, that Alan had to go to a civilian doctor to sort of tell them, and it's.
Yeah, I think it was more circumstance. I think it was the fact that he was home. His regiment was obviously in London, and his mum was obviously worried about him. And she, rather than going back into London through those doctors or whatever, she was like, well, I'm just taking you straight down there now. You know, you need sorting out. Bless him.
But the army, another thing, it's a running theme. Like his regiment seemed to say, it's almost like, do you want to go work with the horses? Like, yeah, just go work with the horses. But I'm wondering, I mean, don't get me wrong, as we said earlier, like there's so much to get out of horses, but did he get any other support? Because it sounds like he was in a bad way mentally. Was there support there, or was it just? I mean,
well, you talk of therapy is quite a sexy thing now, isn't it? Right, everyone's kind of, you know, but back then, sort of we're talking sort of 24 years ago. No, and I mean, I was always very into all of that sort of stuff, and I was saying, you know, you need to talk to, but military-wise, no, not really. And I mean, even now, I think there is a reluctance to sort of speak out when you're in the military, because you're concerned that it's going to be like so bad that it'll be a medical discharge or something, you know. So there is an element of that. I'm not saying that there's no one to talk to. I mean, things have advanced rapidly and evolved in that space hugely, you know, in that time. But sadly for Alan and you know, no.
Yeah, but it sounds like he excelled at the equine side.
Yeah.
And what was his? Did he see out the rest of his career down working with the horses?
He did. Yeah, Alan was on a very rocky road, though. He would kind of had peaks and troughs. So there was anger regulation. There was sexual promiscuity, which is all, you know, all these sort of symptoms, if you like, that are seen as more bad behaviours, especially for someone like me on the receiving end of it, right? But they're all symptoms of PTSD, complex PTSD, anger regulation, drug and alcohol misuse. Alan was actually picked up on a CDT test with several other members of the regiment at that time. And sadly, he was dishonourably discharged. I mean, I've had conversations since, because especially after the Iraq and Afghanistan, alcohol, drugs, it's a thing with it. So it's a coping mechanism. And obviously you can't do that role off your face, but that I believe it should be sort of 2-3 strikes and you're out. There should be some form of kind of rehabilitation going on there, and then tapping in at source right when it's playing out, not particularly if it's service attributable.
So I can completely relate to what you're saying. So I went from the front line of Afghanistan in 2009 to being a civilian in 6 months with no sort of therapy or integration with the troops, because they were either on leave or still in Afghan. And I descended into drug and alcohol addiction. That was me, just full of anger and resentment of how I was treated.
Well, the alcohol leads to the drugs, right? And causes that chemical change within the alcohol. Alcohol is known to be a depressant, right? As well. So you're altering the brain chemistry from the very first glass, and then you kind of lose your inhibitions, and you make some really, really poor choices as a result, right?
100%.
That could be sexual promiscuity, it could be gambling, it could be fighting, it could be all of those things. Any one of those.
So I now so I went to a place called Tom Harrison House, which is the only residential rehab for veterans and blue light services in the UK, and touch wood, 2.5 years later, I'm still clean and sober. I now work for a drug and alcohol service in Hertfordshire, and my role is to support veterans within the service and out of the service. And when you say about 3 strikes on a CDT and you're out, I think I'd like to see the MOD go further, and there should be regardless of how you're discharged, there should be a duty of care put in place, because it's like, right, you're out.
With something in place to help you with that, right?
Because I get it, as you said, it's it's inappropriate to do any job while drunk or high, but just to discard someone and say, it's almost go deal with it. Go deal with it. It's all right. You're not our problem anymore, and that needs to change.
Yeah. And I mean, from my perspective, it was kind of that behaviour playing out. At the time, Josh was sort of barely 2. He was learning to speak and learn, monkey see, monkey do, right? And I just couldn't have those behaviours playing out. And Alan was very, really angry. Really, really angry, and then really, really sad. And I mean, I don't want to do his actual character any disjustice, because that's not the person that,
But I mean, for me, it's for so long I was like, oh, Stuart's an addict, just get on with it, go off and die somewhere. And now it's like, it was part of me, and I think there's an element of, I'll always be an addict. I'll never be able to pick up one drink. I'll never be able. I have to manage myself, and but it's just part of me. There's so much more to me to give this world.
It's part of a lot of people, and a lot of people don't even realise necessarily that alcohol is causing a problem in their life, because they're not overly dependent on it, but when they do, it causes issues, right? And I mean, it's nice that you've gone into the area that you've gone into, because you're not like you've been there, you've experienced it, you'll have a natural empathy. There's nothing worse than someone standing there that's never been through something, preaching you about what you need. You're proof of the pudding, right, of how you can turn that into, post-traumatic growth, if you like, and natural affinity and natural respect with that. But then you've got the other side of the coin. You've got a lot of people that are on a very wonky path, in Civvy Street, you know, reformed heroin addicts, alcoholics, you know, joining the military for that reason, for that discipline and structure. And, you know, and it can be the making of them.
Yeah.
It just depends kind of what nature versus nurture, I think, as well. And the people that you meet along the path who influence you and really, and who you've got, Gene.
Yeah, exactly. And there is, I think, I always say there's a large portion of responsibility. Like for me, there is support if you look for it, whether that be family member to some of the big charities, or there is support out there, but it's up to that individual to like, for example, I say to clients I work with, like, I'm here for you and I want the best for you, but I'm not picking up the phone or managing you 24 hours a day. Like, it's on you to that certain extent.
I mean, some people do need people to reach in, right? And I think there is a lack of that. But also, yes, you have got to want to create that inner change within yourself. Yeah, that drive to do that has to come from somewhere. Yeah.
I'm curious because it sounds like pretty much from the first moment you met Alan, he was suffering, and it sounds like you went through a lot. I'm curious what support you had.
In the form of wives and friends, yeah. I mean, I did do quite a lot of therapy over the road, actually, in Imperial College, as sort of the marriage was breaking down and we kind of were going through the divorce and stuff like that. I did quite a lot of, horses again were my therapy. And obviously my son, you know, was very focused on, I didn't have at the time, and we were only in our early 20s, right? So in hindsight, we were so young and so naive as well, really. And if you knew then what you know now, right? You know, it's one of those sort of scenarios. But as the years sort of evolved, Alan there was a large period where he was impossible, absolutely impossible. He hated me, pure venom, you know. And I really tried to not take that personally, as hurtful as it was, and as destructive of my character and my belief and my value in myself. I've had to work really, really hard on that. But I knew that, like, the connection to Josh could be, you know, that thing that, so under the right circumstances, sort of, you know, with Alan's parents kind of sort of facilitating or having, you know, responsibility of, and Alan coming into that environment, and then gradually we proceeded to, you know, Alan taking him off on holiday and things like that. But it took a lot of time over years, you know. And then I'd say the last 3 years, so Alan ended up in prison. Okay. His drug addiction actually got so bad, and this is the period that, you know, I had limited contact with him. It got so bad that and such a large habit as well that he needed to sell to fund, and he ended up in prison, and he tried to take his own life in prison. And it was at that point I actually phoned the prison and said, look, you are aware that he is a veteran, you know, he's a war veteran, you know, what is your population of veterans, you know, you need and have a duty of care to get him, like, veteran specific help, you know, there's this and this available. And he was signposted to by the Northern Learning Trust, and ended up doing sort of 3 years when he came out with combat stress. But due to service redesigns, his and thousands of other people, their funding was retracted, and they all received a letter basically kind of putting them back into the civilian domain, which was, you know, go and visit your GP and all of that sort of stuff. And Alan actually said, I haven't got the strength to start again, Claire. And I was like, you need to, because he had 3 years of building a rapport, and there was such a transformation in it. You know, Alan was back in the room. And more importantly, touching on what we touched on earlier, he started to address his issues, realizes, you know, his demons, and was susceptible to that rather than fighting against it. And you know, he was surrounding himself at the time with people that were enabling that behaviour, other people that were doing drink and drugs and, you know, all that business. And there was a real transformation in those last 3 years. And we had some incredible conversations in terms of my guilt for leaving the marriage and not sort of, it was impossible to stick by him, right?
Yeah.
On a certain level. And the conversation, you know, he 100%, you know, you've done the right thing. And it broke my heart because he said, you know, Josh is such a beautiful lad. I can't take any credit for it. That's all you know. And but yeah, and so when he was due to come out of prison, he didn't want to go back to that environment, well, just yet. And I said, look, because Alan had 2 other children. I said, you know, go and grab the kids. Come here, stay here. I'll move over to my friend's place. You have the house, go fishing. And he was like, Claire, I can't. After everything I've done to you, like, I can't believe you're still here for me. And I was like, you know, you're my boy's father. Of course I'm going to, you know.
Do you know what? my hairs are all standing on end. So it sounds so much similar to my experience with my son's mum. Like, I put her through absolute shit, like going missing for weekends, ringing around police stations and A&Es, and we've been split up 8 odd years now, and we're so much better co-parents, and I know she's been so supportive throughout that journey, whether when we were together and when we were apart. And I think a lot of the time, especially in addiction, the family seem to be forgotten. It's all about the addict, and there is a necessary part of that, but the shit that the addict puts their loved ones through is unbelievable.
Yeah, and you're in danger of becoming an enabler, right?
Yeah.
Well with it, and if you don't kind of have that tough love, that tough stance, you know, what balance measures, right? But if you don't have that, then your chances are very slim.
Yeah, exactly.
You just go round in a trauma loop, and it's no good for anyone.
Yeah, and then it starts affecting the kids, and it's that transgenerational trauma just carries on and carries on. It's protecting Josh's psychological welfare was my ultimate. Yeah. I'm just interested in the time frames of when Alan got dishonourably discharged. So was that prior to your breakup? Well, it kind of happened at the same time, really. It also transpired through Alan's, well, he told me in person as well, and in his combat stress records, that he was actually sexually abused within the military as well. He was surrounded by some predatory people. At the point where he got picked up on the CDT test, I was cross. I was really cross. I was like, if you had it in the flat, what if you'd have put your hands in your pockets and it had fallen out on the floor and Josh is crawling, you know, and I was like, get out. And he went over into the single accommodation. And a couple of weeks kind of passed, and I was like, I need to stand by him, you know, I need to help him, because I knew all the other stuff that was going on as well. I need to find a way. But it actually transpired, I'd started to hear on the jungle drums, if you like, about sexual promiscuity, shall we say. And I kind of called him up to the flat and said, like, you know, I need to talk to you about something, because for me this was make or break in my that was the one thing that I really couldn't shift on. Yeah. And he denied it, and then eventually, probably about a week later, he sort of, bless him, he was sat on the floor kind of crying and said, you know, yeah, no, I have, and not just this, and not just that as well, like the whole lot come out. And I was just like, oh my God, like, yeah. I said that we can't do it, you know, in simplified terms, if you like. And I remember sort of holding the door open for him and said, look, you know, we leave all this stuff at the door, but you're still a father to that boy. And he kind of went off back to the single lads accommodation. But yeah, that was kind of but I mean, 25 as well, you know.
I was taking a lot of it personally, as you would do, right? You know, it was our marriage, it was our home, it was both our jobs, it was all of that. And yeah, bless him. I think Alan kind of stuck around for another month because he did various guard duties and bits and pieces, and then he eventually sort of went off home back up north. And I would take Josh up, physically take him up, and Alan would sort of bring him back to King's Cross, and there'd be like a hands-over takeover and, you know, tears in his eyes at various points. Other times it'd be pure venom. You know, just kept sort of pushing through with it. And yeah, we eventually, 7-8 years later, got to the place where, you know, he was sort of back in our home and in our life, and we did a surprise birthday party for Josh, and, you know, his girlfriends even come and stayed with him, and his great nana, and it was kind of highly dysfunctional from the outset, but beautifully dysfunctional, because we were co-parenting like you are now, you know. And I think that can be really detrimental, like a really kind of fraught divorce can be just as damaging to a child than parents that are actually reasonably amicable and setting an example and treating each other with respect, right? Because that, so we reached a really beautiful place.
I think it's interesting seeing other families, other adults. So my son recently, or a couple of seasons ago, joined a new football team, and so I was new out of rehab, and it was the first time that I was going to the training or going to a football match, and obviously his mum was there, and all the other, like Sarah, my son's mum, said to me afterwards that all the other parents were like that to her, because she knew them by this point. Was like, oh, what, your ex is coming up? Oh, how's that going to be? And Sarah's like, it's fine. Like, we are good. Like,
it's interesting, isn't it? People's kind of perception of, like, you know, Alan's girlfriend stayed here, Julie, bless her, she went home, and they were like, what, you were staying with the ex-wife? And she was like, yeah. She's like,
exactly. It's cool. Better surely that's better for everyone involved than to have this, and everyone's got a previous life, like, do you know what I mean? But it sounds like Alan, so after the discharge, the divorce, the travelling to being I mean, I use this word about myself, and I should have more, but being a part-time dad, I hear that, I mean, so he went to prison, and so it sounded like a period of time after coming out of prison when he was giving back and supporting other people that you found the Alan, or the Alan that you fell in love with. And was this the period where sort of his girlfriend was coming down and you were staying together?
Yeah, so that was sort of so for Josh's 18th birthday, that was the particular occasion that, you know, I think they come down on a couple of occasions. I would sort of move out, they would have the house and kind of, you know, go out and do stuff around here. But yeah, so sort of moving on from that, it was we'd just gone into lockdown. Alan had already received the letter pre-lockdown. Julie messaged me and said, have you heard from Alan? Because it wasn't unusual for Alan and I to sort of talk and chat. And I was like, no, why? Like, what's going on? And she said, I said, you need to call the police, Julie. Because Julie didn't have any sort of military kinds of insight, if you like, the psychological kind of insight. Because, I mean, I've probably said before, like, throughout that time in the period, my boss, he hung himself in the office.
Bloody hell. At night? This was still at bloody hell.
Horrific. And then another colleague of ours hung himself. And then you had later on, you know, after Iraq and Afghanistan, like guys not coming back at all, or limb loss, or you could see that they were the troubled. So, I mean, all of that has been kind of like been inadvertently sort of in amongst that day to day. Generally, naturally sort of seeing that play out, you kind of learn a lot about that environment, right, from all different kind of perspectives, because you've got wives within that, you've got children within that, or partners and colleagues and friends. And yeah, you just naturally sort of, well, you inadvertently gain a natural insight and empathy and understanding, right? And I sort of said to Julie, like, you need to call the police. And Alan was actually on probation at that point, and she was worried because he was on probation, and if he had have gone off and succumbed to sort of doing more drink and drugs, she didn't want to get him in any trouble. And I was like, Julie, anyway, I rang Alan's mum, because I mean, I'm just trying to be respectful of like the boundaries, right? So I rang Alan's mum. She said he hasn't been answering any of her texts or calls. I said, look, I said, get yourself at home, because she was at work. I said, I'm going to call the police. I'm going to make the call. And I called them, and essentially it was a 20-minute conversation. I was detailing that he was a war veteran, that he's been in trauma therapy, residential trauma therapy, that his funding had been cut, that he'd had anger regulation, emotional regulation, was drug and alcohol dependent. And that he should be known to them, right, because he's on probation and he's been in prison. So essentially, it was a 20-minute conversation that transpired. Like, when I picked it apart in Alan's inquest, Alan was missing over a period of 3 days. He'd taken Zeus with him because he bought Zeus with the intention of training him as a PTSD therapy dog. And sadly, he was found 3 days later within Woodland. And in Alan's inquest, I wanted to kind of disseminate the whole pathway, not just within policing, but within his whole care pathway, from the point that he left the military to the point that, he took his own life. And there were several, if not tens, of missed opportunities. And I'm doing work in other areas outside of policing as well in terms of connectivity. It became very clear that due to the fragmented nature of the veteran welfare landscape, there needed to be like more of a more cohesive multi-agency approach. One of my arguments is it's, a mental health genre with more in place than any other mental health genre, with over 2,500 charities and entities geared towards this sector. If we can't navigate it in that arena, then there's something seriously wrong, right? And so I kind of, in Alan's inquest, identified that, that the police weren't veteran trauma informed, and I kind of went in there with, I wanted, in an inquest, you have IPs rather than witnesses, so interested parties. So I had the police officers involved, or 3 of them, combat stress, a CPM worker, and other people sort of at the table. And I made it clear from that this is not about a claim, right? And this is not about blame. This is about change, right? And I'm saying to you now, because I presented the FORSA protocol in the inquest, if you would have known this and this about his past, if you would have known about suicidal ideation that he spoke to with this person, would that have affected the outcome of your risk assessment and your allocation of resources and those kind of things? And it became very clear that was, that the call handler wasn't veteran trauma informed. And, so I come out of there. It was a 3-day hearing. And I come out of there and I got straight on. In the interim, my local MP was the former Defence Minister, Mark Francois. And he knew of our family story, like when Alan was in combat stress. And he wrote to me when Alan passed away to sort of offer his condolences and any support that, bless him, And when I phoned him probably about 3-4 days, and I mean, I was a mess. I was beside myself on the, I was thinking all sorts of horrible things like that you do. You go down a very dark road. Like, even I was envisaging myself being Alan, and did he, like, within those last moments, kind of regret what he was doing? Because you hear these stories about, people that awful stuff, and obviously trying to keep. I mean, what Josh, like, so that particular day, so I'm going off on a bit of a tangent. Okay. I have about 5,000 tabs open at one time. You have to excuse me.
That's right.
You're very neurospicy. And
I like that, neurospicy.
We were sitting in the garden. Some friends of mine had come over, and we were sat there, and Alan had already been missing a day. And I'd said to Josh, go down to work at the marina and just keep busy. We'll get through this, right? And we all went down to pick Josh up. And just before, I'd got a call from the police officer saying, we found his car. We're going in to the woods with the police dogs. And I just had a sinking feeling. My friends were like, it'd be fine, Claire, you know, it'd be fine. And I was like, so we've gone down to get Josh. And by this point, Josh is kind of walking towards me up the platoon down the marina on the phone. And then it transpired that Alan's mum had called Josh to tell him that Alan had passed in that sort of 20 minutes, if you like. And I could just see Josh coming towards me, and he was like, it's not good, Mum, like Dad's dead. And I was like, you know, and I was like, get him in the car. Couldn't find my car keys. We're driving back. Josh couldn't breathe. He was like, I can't feel my face. I can't. And I'm trying to like drive the car and process everything and sort of keep him calm. And in that conversation there, Josh said, I want Zeus to come and live with us. Now, prior to that, I'd always said, no dogs. Alan had always said to me, what you need is a dog. And I was like, Alan, I do not need a dog. Right? And at that particular point, I just sort of said yes, you know, absolutely. Like whether that was the right thing or wrong thing to do. I mean, obviously Zeus is beautiful, but he's come with his challenges. And that night, I mean, Josh, physical pain, like physically, stomach being up. Like I was in and out of his bedroom like I was when he was a poorly baby, you know, on 24/7 watch. And I mean, before I knew it, 3 or 4 weeks had passed, and I called Mark Francois and said, look, this is what I want to do with it. The call handlers should be, you know, they should be asking, the police should be identifying, you know, veterans or those with an armed forces history, whether that's the call handler, whether that's a domestic, you know, whether that's in a bar fight, a homeless person presenting as vulnerable, you know, they need to be asking this question. There's this whole referral care pathway out there that we need to make this. So I created this PDF, presented it in the inquest, pushed and backed by the legal team. He did everything pro bono, by the way, you know, they were incredible. And and then I contacted the National Police Chiefs Council. I went up to see Johnny Mercer, who was the Defence Minister at that time. I'd already had a Zoom meeting with him because of COVID and everything. And I was like, this is what I want to do. And there were 3 police forces at the table at the time. I was talking to various different forces. Something happened with one force's system change or something. So I wanted it in Parliament for the launch for that November. So I was like, right, fuck it, let's just do it. So we did a 6-month pilot in Greater Manchester Police. They've been absolutely incredible. Yeah. I don't think any of us really realised how high the demand was going to be. So we launched in Parliament in 2023. We did a 6-month pilot in Greater Manchester Police. During that time, over 100 veterans were reported as missing.
Just from Greater Manchester? Just from Greater
Manchester. We're at over 360 veterans, and 2 of which have been serving in Manchester alone now. And and then we did a 6 months later back at we were due to go back into Parliament actually, but Rishi Sunak, bless him, called an election, and I had all these police officers from different forces and first and second and third sector, like the Home Office, your breakfast clubs. I wanted everyone from the entire pathway there, Walking with the Wounded, NHS, Sculpt Courage, South British Legion, breakfast clubs, you know, the whole lot there, all in one room. Everyone had sort of booked their hotels and arranged travel and stuff, and I had no venue. I was like, anyway, made some calls, some strings were pulled, and we ended up back at our home in Hyde Park Barracks, facilitated in the mess by the regiment. And bless them, you know, they entertained all our guests and took them around to meet the horses afterwards. And Ross Kemp kind of came along, and it was amazing. And that was sort of our national rollout. And now we're in just under 2 years. We're in a third of forces. I've got 7 coming on. That's not 7. 7 coming on for Remembrance Week this year. So they tend to come on in and around like VJ 80 Day. Day. So our home force, Essex, went live on Armed Forces Day. We did a big rollout of Colchester Barracks, had like MT involved, because this is a really important. It's not just all 43 forces, it's the devolved nations. It's your military police, your transport police, you know, and yeah.
So, I mean, I guess the question is, let's start off with, what is the Force Protocol?
So it's essentially a policing suicide prevention strategy. There seems to be a bit of misconception that it's all about an online form that's provided by Safe and Found Online. Actually, I'll just give a special shout out to those, because there was a guy called Charlie Hedges who was on holiday in a caravan in Cornwall, and he got a call from me, and I was like, I want to do this and this, and he's a missing persons expert, former CID.
Okay.
And he was like, yeah, let's do it. And because they had at the time the Herbert Protocol. Have you heard of the Herbert Protocol? It was only ever in paper format, and they were looking at digitalising it, and they've been doing a lot of, Safe and Found Online have been doing a lot of work with a Yorkshire force and the National Police Chiefs Council trialling sort of all the GDPR of all of that and that sort of stuff, and it was proving. I mean, I love AI, but I also love like proper human connection as well, right? Yeah. So it's about covering all of that and utilising all the resources. So in Alan's bundle pre-inquest, there was a Herbert Protocol in paper format that hadn't been filled out, and George Herbert was a veteran, and I naturally assumed that it was for veterans. Right. And I was like, well, why hasn't that been filled out? Because it was blank. And I kind of like looked into it, and I was like, it's for Alzheimer's. There needs to be something like this for veterans. So we've got an online version of the form, which the veteran themselves, but judging by, you know, how one was, and a lot of veterans are filling out forms is you know, so we've put a consent option on there, so a partner or an advocate from the Breakfast Club, the NHS, or wherever can look, I'm a bit worried about you, can we submit this information, do you consent, press the consent, you know, because there's intel on sort of suicidal ideation, instant access to their number plate, medication that they might be on, changes in medication, that sort of stuff. Really important intel for the police in terms of not only a risk assessment, but like allocation of those resources and where they look, because not all that wander are lost as well. So within a 5-minute time frame, they have to, you know, in amongst hundreds of missing persons, whether that's a child, you know, no one's sort of prioritized over anyone, but if you've got instant access into that sort of unique mental health genre, and you know that, you know, there's suicidal ideation, I mean, we've actually intercepted under said tree with at point of suicide, right? So it's about the police identifying whether, you know, the person being reported missing or in custody or in the vicinity of policing is a veteran. You know, they've all signed, most of them have all signed the Armed Forces Covenant and have a, you know, a legal duty of care, if you like, but also a natural affinity and understanding. And a lot of those police officers are actually formerly military themselves as well.
Yeah.
So it was about reconnecting and rebuilding all of that. At the time, Nova, who's used as part of the referral, if you like, for the police referral, were only kind of in 11 forces at that time, 11 or 15, and they've gradually sort of spread into every, and are now regional and going into Scotland and potentially Ireland as well. So it's about the police being veteran trauma informed. So we've had the Force Protocol written into College of Policing, so like in the early stages of policing as well. It's about collating that information, getting all that intel, allocation of the resources, then obviously finding the veteran, building that sort of natural empathy and rapport, rather than going in there all guns blazing, lights whirring, you know. And that's one of the things that I said to the police officers: if you find his whereabouts, do not have the lights on. He's incredibly paranoid. He's like de-escalation, right? And then the fourth phase is to refer into the veteran specific landscape, and you know, that potentially helps that veteran and their family, but it also reduces the impact on further policing and NHS resources, right, as well, and other. I mean, so
does it rely on either the veteran themselves or a member of the family or a service that they're already working with, filling in this form to make the constabulary aware?
I mean, it should be now. You know, we've had it written into policy in various forces that it's part of 11 questions that the call handler asks, right? In amongst questions like, you know, their child from care, or those kind of things, various protective characteristic traits, if you like, veterans or those who are in armed forces history are on that list. Even the person that's making the call might not even be aware of why the fact that they're a veteran is relevant, right, as well. So that is essentially the FORSA protocol. It's all of that. And I've also created a paper version of the form because I didn't want to completely do away with the paper version. Yep. There's a number of reasons for that. You've got some incredibly, paranoid veterans out there that have been on operational tours and would not want to be on any database whatsoever, right? But they've got partners and loved ones around them that may possibly need instant access, rather than relying on the call handler that could be a junior or new to the role or whatever to ask those questions. With that form I can go, right, this is his NHS number, this is his registration plate, this is his known suicide ideation, this is, I'm saying he, she, and it's about instant access all in one place, so to cover all bases. And the other reason I wanted the paper, you've got people kind of living in remote areas, haven't got haven't got a natural empathy with AI or the internet, but also you've got a lot of wives or partners out there who've got members in service, and they've been behind the scenes like I was, trying to encourage them to seek some help, but they're sitting on the edge. They don't want to necessarily, or haven't even really acknowledged within themselves that they've got a problem, right, or an issue. And it's about wives then, if they need to report, service personnel to the police or to the military police, they've got instant access to that information as well.
So, say my partner's a veteran and he or she goes missing, and I'm concerned, I phone 999 to report it. Yeah. Should I be mentioning the FORSA protocol and
the FORSA protocol at that point of call within the forces that are on the force should be actioned. It doesn't technically matter whether they're on the system or the bit of paper. That call handler or those police officers investigating will ask and should ask all those questions.
Okay. So just the question should be asked when somebody's reporting a missing person: is this person a serving or former member of the armed forces?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's been written into policy for most police forces. Yeah, that is what the call handler does now.
And then that kicks in the process.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, a lot of the forces are now sort of re-signing their armed forces covenant and their commitment to it. And obviously we know, like 2026, it's actually going to be enshrined into some kind of law, and councils and schools and are going to have like a legal obligation and duty of care to implement.
The local authorities have already got a legal duty under when it comes to housing, education and healthcare. And this is one of the fights I have with local authorities, and I've been banging at the door of my own local authority enough now that they're actually going to make changes. And the thing that surprises me is this legislation stuff gets passed in government, and I just question how it gets filtered down to the people that are actually doing the work and need to know, because council, we didn't realise that. Like when I mentioned the covenant to them, the first thing they say is, we're gold members. And I'm like, that's on the employer recognition scheme. I don't care. Well, fair enough, good. But what about the covenant duty?
Yeah. Yeah, and they're not. A lot of people aren't sort of educated in this, and I mean, I've just done an amazing one with Cumbria Police and Westmoreland and Furness. There's an amazing lady up there, Linda. Like, she's got this whole armed forces board there, and that they come together regularly, and you know, within the councils, within the policing, within all of it, they're so connected. They've got this amazing network, like amazing cohesive. Work, and they're all singing from the same song sheet, and kind of we sort of built that in Manchester, and we did the year review in Northumbria and Northumbria Police, and then, you know, a year on for Cumbria. So all our forces are at different stages. You've got some just on, but we have a national meeting chaired by the National Police Chiefs Council, because it's been endorsed by the National Police Chiefs Council. So a guy called Alan Rees-Cooper is our national lead now. And we have all the forces in at various different phases once a month, sharing best practice. We've got a data share agreement between the forces, because that's another thing. That's where one of the massive pluses of the online form is a cross-border missing, and getting that information to another force, or sharing that information with another force. So we've got like a data sharing agreement done. We've covered quite a lot of ground in under 2 years, really. I'm quite proud of us.
Yeah, I think you should be.
Honest.
Just from a force's point of view, what a constabulary, how does it affect them? So say they were at the, I don't know, there's a constabulary in the country that isn't aware, they've got nothing in place, but they're open to it. What do they have to have put in place? How does it affect them?
What? Sorry, what do you mean?
So as in, like, I'm hearing, obviously they have to have, I mean, a fundamental one would be their call handlers be trained.
Yeah.
But maybe I'm answering my own question. I'm making up training, policy, communication and collaboration with other forces, and just being aware, making everyone in the force aware of that veteran trauma-informed care.
All the forces have been contacted. So we've got like a spreadsheet of those that are live on the force protocol, those in negotiations. There's like a 12-week run-up to, they have to kind of nominate kind of 50 staff members for the unique access code from Safe and Found Online. It's not just willy-nilly any police officer can access it, right? It's audited the other end as well, so we know that it can't be misused by anyone. In terms of, you know, criminal offences and things like that. It's purely for missing and vulnerable.
So you mentioned Safe and Found Online.
Yeah. So Safe and Found Online are the online platform, the online version of the Forza protocol that sits alongside Herbert protocol, digitalised, and I think they're looking at Philomena as well. So that that they host the digitalised platform, if that makes sense. And so, as I say, 50 members of each force can have this unique access code, and then when it's acknowledged, they will check the system to see whether they're on there. You know, that even the call handler might not know whether they're on there. It could be, I don't know, a Breakfast Club member that's reporting them missing and they haven't turned up, and the wife's already put it on. So it's to mitigate all of those kind of pitfalls, if you like. Sorry, I've forgotten what your original question was.
No, go on.
I know. Right, so here, so the outstanding forces, the former Defence Minister Mark Francois wrote to all the remaining forces chief constables to kind of go, right, this is here now, really successful, da-di-da-di-da. They're all coming in because of that letter. One of the things we've done it different ways. We've come from the top down, or someone from the bottom up has been pushing, you know, a passionate veteran themselves and wants to push it up through their chain of command. You know what that's like, right?
Yeah.
So we've come from top, we come from bottom, we come from the middle, you know, and the National Police Chiefs Council have written to all the National Police Chiefs Council aren't the governing body, but they're kind of respected. They are they don't have to do what the National Police Chief, but they can do what they advise should they choose to do so. So yeah, we've had no real problems in people engaged in all of this. A large increment of this time was taken up by the actual pilot as well. We had to get that right and iron out any flaws and that kind of stuff before we could present a model if you like, to other forces. It would be different for different forces as well. So the national meeting that we do, we share sort of best practices, and other forces have advanced and evolved and are doing other things and thinking outside the box, and they're sharing that idea with, you know, some of them are engaging with football clubs and spreading the word that way. One recently sort of coming and said, we've got a big like employer here, we're going to tap into that one. And it's kind of, in the veteran community, you kind of preach into the converted, right?
Yeah.
You need to be thinking outside the box in other areas of making them aware of this system and their obligation and duty of care according to the Armed Forces Covenant, and what they can do to help all of us. At some point, particularly the police, will undoubtedly come into contact with someone with an Armed Forces service history.
Yeah,
so just educate yourselves.
The question I have, so would it be beneficial if every veteran, that's whether they're struggling or not, puts their details on the system?
Yeah, and that's the other aspect of it. You might not be struggling today, right? In 5-6 years' time, you could have a death in the family, a marriage breakdown, any number of things. I don't want to be Little Miss Doom and Gloom.
Yeah, but life happens, right?
Yeah, it's a practical way of kind of,
Because
it's a preventive measure, and that's kind of what it's about for me. And yes, you can do it yourselves, or if you're not in the space, or you know someone that you know is struggling, you're concerned about them, or they've been missing before, they're a risk to themselves, then sit with them, take the time, put them on there
just in case,
or fill out the paper version.
I mean, so I'm very aware, and I see on social media, and I always share it, like the beacon alerts go out, I have to say, far too regularly. Does that link in what?
In my original PDF, I wanted the beacon launched. So we launched a beacon for Alan. And it was actually a witness that found Alan's car parked down the lane. I'm a big fan of that. I have a bit of an issue, not with all call signs, but when people screenshot and share, right? That image of that person is still in the domain, right? That person needs to heal and get better and further employment and all those kind of things, right? And if that is still there in the public domain, and that's the beauty of the beacon alert. If you share from source, once they're found, those details come off, the picture comes off, everything. But when people screenshot and put it on, I don't know, fill your boots and wherever, it's like, can you take that down now?
Yeah, so, I'm very conscious to share only from the source, as it were, from the official page, because
and not only that, you get some of them go out and there's no like incident report number to centralise it to the station and keep those comms cohesive as well. And it's like, he's gone missing. Well, have you actually called the police? Have you reported him as missing? Oh, we just know. Do that. Get the code. If you're going to put the picture on, type to a link that thing. As soon as he's found, it's confirmed, or they're found, get rid of that picture out of the social media domain.
Yeah, I was. I did before we spoke. I was looking up and it's a veteran suicides. Now, I see people on LinkedIn quoting statistics, and where the statistics come from, it's a best guess.
So the statistics are, we'd never had the date. Well, we had 1996 to 2018, right? We had some data. It wasn't until kind of veterans went on the census, or those of an Armed Forces history went onto the census. ONS did some research. They produced the statistics for 2021. We lost 253 veterans, 17 of which were female, the rest were male. And that equates to roughly 4.85 people a week, right? So you've got that. But what I was having before that is and I'm going to revert back to those statistics, is that the 2018 ones, that if you were 25 and you'd done under 7 years service, you were more likely to take your own life. But compared to the civilian cohort, there's no greater risk, right? That was the narrative that was going around. I personally found that really dismissive. So what we don't need to do anything about suicide prevention within the veteran service cohort, then, no, right? But the 2021, if you look closely, it says age from 2025 to 44 and male, not disregarding females, obviously, you are more likely than the civilian cohorts take. So it's
four times more likely.
Well, right, they're male, they're that age, they've seen active service. We've got this information off it, right? So in terms of the risk assessment,
So interestingly, I saw that the ONS publication, and looking at how they came to those numbers,
they're not accurate.
It's like that.
They're still not accurate. And I mean, at the time that was taken, not all the inquests will have taken place for those that have taken their own life. Not all inquests are declared as suicide, right? Misadventure and, all different things. Alan's was actually a narrative conclusion with stipulations in place, one of which was working with the police to try and rectify this situation. But the date's still out.
I guess the question is, would you like to see focus on statistics?
Yeah, we're collating statistics. I think there's, like, in America, right, they're a lot more evolved. They've got a larger demographic, so, as well, so that kind of helps in a way. But they've openly openly kind of accept the correlation between service, drug and alcohol addiction, and the correlation to that, right? Whereas sort of for a while here in this country, it was a bit like, I met quite a lot of resistance. I was getting really tired of hearing, and 14,000 people leave the military every year. So I'm not I'm not a fan of war, but it's just kind of like loads of people go into and come out of the army and have an amazing time. Best thing they've ever done, right? But clearly with those statistics at 4.8 a week, possibly more, right? We clearly have a vulnerable cohort, and it's like, what are we going to do to mitigate the risks to those people? We've got all this help and resources available. Utilise it. Let's make it cohesive. And my hope is that, that is what the FORSA protocol is doing. It's one of those key components that, a bit like what with Valor that's coming down, I really love that idea, regional offices, regional field officers. Yeah.
So having had your pilot in Manchester, and Manchester being one of the pilot areas for Valor, is there... Valor. Is there... what? So my personal opinion on Valor, I think it's good. I think a lot of veterans are getting caught up in this £50 million and what's that going to do? But having spoken to Al and looked into it, we're not talking about creating new trauma centres. We're not talking about creating new hubs. We're talking
what's already
there. But also having somebody, a position in each area, these regional Valor reps that have got direct links to government. So, for example, like this year, I've advocated for multiple veterans for housing with local authorities, and I send all the legislation stuff, and they turn around and go, nope, that's our final decision, because I make up in my head that they're getting this email off little old Stu from the muster point. Who's he? Like, just ignore him. Whereas if I had a Valor rep to go to, may have some more power. But I guess the question was, sorry, have you had any involvement with this Valor pilot? Is there any...
Yeah, well, we sit on a government platform. We've been officially endorsed. We're endorsed on Armed Forces Day, in the Houses of Parliament, in the House of Commons even, sorry. And yeah, I've had meetings with, or a meeting with the Defence Minister, former Defence Minister. You have a lot of seat changes as well while this has been playing out. There's seat changes. It's like a game of bloody chess.
I'm acutely aware that there's been one this week with Al Khan's leaving his position as Veterans Minister, and the
female lady taking out,
Sandra Jones, and it's that's the nature of government, I guess.
Yeah, and that's as long as the story. And the other thing for me as well with FOSA is I want it to, no matter what. I mean, especially the third time we were in Parliament. You had a party changeover, and I was already working with, Mark Francois and Johnny Mercer and the likes. And then I needed, it's like, this is cross-partisan, everyone in the same room. So like Al Khan's came into the room, the Labour representatives, went really, really well. Everyone was amazing. And yes, absolutely, it should be a cross-partisan subject. A lot of subjects should be, let's face it. But it's kind of, I've had, conversations with the OVA and all of that. In terms of like the £5 million budget, if I was to tell you that I haven't had a single penny for the FOSA protocol, I've done it all on sheer determination and connectivity and the beautiful people that are around me that drive this with passion and determination.
Well, that's the thing. Some things, yes, money's nice, but it's about the personalities involved. And certainly I see, and I think, you mentioned about how different forces are at different stages. And it sort of goes back into that postcode lottery. And I dream of a day where central government just says, this is how it's going to work. You will do it. Do you know what I mean? Because you're just relying on local authorities or different constabularies, like somebody within that force sort of buying into it, if that makes sense.
I think, especially in the last couple of years, certainly since before Alan passed away, they are nailing it. They are getting a lot better, and it has evolved at a rate of knots. I mean, I've said that before, and you've got the single care pathway and all of those kind of things. I think a little bit more money needs to be put in certain areas like Tom Harrison House and housing projects, Healthier Heroes and the Block and all of those kind of guys that are dealing with, the really, really cool complex cases. The cases that 9 times out of 10 other people won't touch because their needs are too complex and all of that sort of stuff, right? We see it all, we know it all, right? But that kind of stuff needs to happen, and it's but that said, within that landscape there is a lot of toxicity and a lot of dysfunction and a lot of people in it for themselves and not necessarily for the higher good of the veterans community properly, so it's about discernment and integrity and all of those kind of things really, and identifying who's who, who's where, who's actually being productive, what proven results. I mean, that's the thing with the FOSA protocol. It's not a concept, it's way beyond a concept now, right? It's proved its viability with no money. It's worth its weight in gold. I mean, I personally could do a bit of financial support. That would be great, but put that one in there. But
just are you? I mean, I always like to hear a success story. Like, and I'm guessing you've probably had many, but, and actually, I think you said earlier on where a veteran's gone missing and the FOSA protocol's got its work to the point where you've stopped them at point of, I mean, what bigger testament do you need? That's incredible. And I can,
and that's down to the police forces and the key the figures that we don't even know their names, right? People working right behind the scenes and stuff. There's been a lot of people involved in the FOSA protocol from inception in 2022. You wouldn't have even
it's brilliant.
heard of. They've all had key
I do have one more question in terms of statistics, and I'm curious. It made me think. So, are veterans that go missing? Do you see? Are they more likely going missing to take their life than a non-veteran?
Than a non-veteran, I wouldn't say yes or no, but we do know, aged between 24 and 44, there is a higher chance, right? There are many reasons why someone would take their own life, right? Many reasons. Some are unknown to this day. I mean, I have so many questions that one day I will ask Alan, and he's going to get a kick in. He's in big trouble, let me tell you. You know, but they're broad, they're vast, they're complex. We need more data. We need more understanding. We're collating data. I'm with Anglia Ruskin University next week. You know, we're looking at other universities are on the journey as well. You know, that was a key piece of information in terms of statistics, you know, the ONS one.
Yeah.
And we just need the data, and more needs to be done to help improve it.
Yeah. So what, well, maybe you've answered it already, but what does the future hold? What do you need people to do apart from give you data and sign up?
Become armed forces trauma informed, become aware of the landscape and what's available and who's who and who's where, and what, you know, become aware of the Armed Forces Covenant. Connection, connectivity, understanding, empathy, without too much enabling.
Yep, I hear you. Well, it's been incredible talking to you, and I've learned so much, and I hope the listeners have. And I get it. Like, we spoke to Nikki Scott not so long ago.
She's a beautiful little, isn't she?
Brilliant, yeah. And the amount of people I've spoken to, the people that seem to have come through bad situations. I believe that if you hit rock bottom, or the harder you fall, the stronger you rise. And you're certainly testament to that.
Yeah, and I mean, I think people think we're like these delicate little flowers and don't want to broach the subject and all of that. No, you couldn't be further from the truth, right? Okay,
exactly.
We need a bit of delicate handling and a little bit of respect here and there every once in a while, and go.
Like everyone.
But, yeah, exactly. Just be a decent human, you know.
Brilliant. But thank you so much for your time. Keep fighting the good fight. Thank you very much.
No, you're welcome. Thank you, darling.